Good afternoon and good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jennifer Gill, and I'm the Director of Global Product Marketing at Zerto, and we have a very exciting webinar for you today. We have Brian Basand with HPE, and then Henry Balthazar with the 451 group. And there we go. So in just a second, we'll introduce the speakers, and then I'll turn it over to Henry, and he will walk through some research and then how to select the best solutions for your environment. And then Brian and I will take you through the right environment for your mission-critical applications and how you can ensure the applications are available. So here is the team today. So first we have Henry Balthazar, Research Director Storage from the 451 group. Henry has been in the storage and hardware industry for 20 years as an industry analyst and a journalist, and he advises clients on a number of issues, but storage virtualization, cloud storage, and data center infrastructure, which is why we have Henry here with us today. Thank you so much, Henry.
Hey, thanks for having me today, Jen. I'm very happy to join you guys today. Next slide, please.
Well, I was going to do Brian
and
me.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Jumping the gun here.
So that's okay. So we have Brian Basand. He is with HPE Cloud Product Marketing Manager. Quite a mouthful on the title. He's based in Seattle and is a lead marketing manager for the HPE Helium Cloud System, and he works on developing, the strategy, positioning. He works with customers, partners, and sales to deliver optimized solutions for hybrid IT. So thank you so much for being here, Brian.
Hey, thank you for having me, and good morning or good afternoon to everybody out there on the call.
And then lastly, myself, so I'm the Director of Global Product Marketing at Zerto. I've been with Zerto for over 5 years, and I have many responsibilities, including interest relations and product marketing, which is why I get to do fun webinars like the one we have today. And now, Henry, we are ready for you.
Thanks so much, Jen. Next slide, please. You can skip ahead to the next slide, and one more. Thanks so much today, and yeah, as you can tell, I've had too much coffee this morning, and I'm also very excited about today's topic. Really, one of the key things that we've been looking at the last few years is the transformation of data protection, and I think some of the things that are interesting are not only has the technology changed substantially over the last couple of years, but really I think the most important thing is that the customers are changing. And when I mean my customers are changing, what I'm talking about is really the expectations that customers have for the services that you're deploying for them and for their workloads. I think that's a key aspect, and one of the key things to take a look at when you start trying to justify revamping your disaster recovery and availability type offerings. But really, when I look at the problems we have today, and one of the scariest things is, if you look at traditional infrastructure, I believe they are really at a breaking point. As we'll see in some of our findings in the next couple slides, right now, a lot of organizations, the majority of organizations have suffered outages or data loss in the last couple of years. We'll be showing that data point pretty soon, but that's a serious problem, and a lot of people can't deal with that. But we'll also be talking a little bit about what are the repercussions if you do lose data or you do lose worker productivity. And those are really the key things you have to think about when you're trying to justify these things. Next thing, as I mentioned, is client expectations for resiliency are rising. As you are well aware, we live in a everything right now type of era. There's serious repercussions for outages and availability of data, and serious repercussions that can affect not only your day-to-day business, but the future of your business in terms of the reputation and other aspects you should care about. You don't have to look too far into the headlines to see that there was yet another big outage for a airline provider, and those are the type of things that linger, and with those type of problems, they can mean a huge amount of pain for your business going forward if you don't solve those things and really win back customer trust. The other key aspect from a technology perspective is when we look at the advent of virtualization and what's been going on with how that's transformed and helped create these new cloud-type architectures, while that's been great, the way we've been doing traditional backup, the way we've been doing traditional data protection doesn't quite work as well with virtualized workloads. We need to have better tools to be more granular and to make sure that we're getting to a faster level of recovery when we need to have that. Next slide, please.
Sure, and actually before I take us to the next slide, I did forgot to mention one thing. If anyone has a question, we'd be happy to take those. Just use the question tab that popped up for me on the right-hand side of my screen. There should be a panel there. There's a question area. Just type your question in there. So sorry to interrupt you, Henry. Back over to you.
Sure, no problem. And this is some findings that we saw from a survey that we took late last year. And really, when you start looking at this data point, the bullet would have shown that about 77% of the people we surveyed had experienced either a data loss or worker productivity loss in the last 5 years, which means the vast majority of you, that's probably happened. In terms of what's the impact and what happens when you have these outages, the obvious ones are that, yes, there's been a loss of revenue, a loss of worker productivity, a loss of revenue probably due to a loss of transactions and things like that. But really, I think the other key things to start thinking about, besides those two things that are obvious, are, if you're down, you could have a really terrible impact on your loss of your customer loyalty and also the reputation of your company, as we just discussed in terms of what's going on with some of these high-profile failures. I think another key aspect that's very important is what's the impact of an outage on compliance in terms of industry regulations. In some cases, too many outages can lead to huge fines and other things that may potentially knock your company out of business. So these are really definitely key things that have to be addressed, and key things that are important to a company beyond just the core technology infrastructure you have in your environment. Next slide, please. And yeah, that's that flying bullet point. 77% have lost productivity in the last 5 years, which is a big number. Next slide. When we look a little bit deeper into, well, let's see the workloads we have. Not every workload's the same. A lot of companies have a mix of mission-critical, business-critical, and non-critical workloads in their environment. But what was really scary to me, or was really telling to me, is that when you start looking at the far right, it is what you expect. The vast majority of these people expect to get a mission-critical workload to be recovered within under 2 hours or less, preferably in under an hour or less, or in some cases that 50% at the bottom in a minute or less. So for mission-critical, you would expect to have those types of workloads, and you would expect to have people want to do that. I think what was more scary to me and more surprising to me is when we start looking at that left side of the equation with non-critical workloads, things like test dev, things that may not even be client-facing, things that may not even be production. What was scary to me is that 24% of these workloads, according to customers, have to be recoverable within an hour. Yeah, so to me, when I start seeing that shows that even if you have a so-called non-critical test dev type of workload sitting in your environment, you still need to be able to recover that quickly. You still need to be able to give access to that in the case of an outage. And customers still think those things are very important to them, because nobody wants to lose work, nobody wants to lose productivity. And I think that's really the impetus in terms of why we need to start changing things, because these expectations are getting higher. Next slide, please. And diving even deeper into this, is one of the other things we asked within the survey was, well, what are the expectations for a recovery, looking at the IT side versus the end user side? And the thing I'd note there is, on the IT side, they think maybe about 7% of their workloads have to be recoverable in about a minute or less, 45% in under an hour. Looking at the end user side of it, these guys are obviously a lot more demanding than what the IT guys want to provide. And so that to me shows that there's a bit of a gap in terms of what IT is prepared to do and what end users are starting to expect to happen. From the end user perspective, they have about 22% of their workloads want to be recovered in around a minute, and 41% in under an hour, with another additional 18% in under 2 hours. So to me, this is really this key area where if you don't start delivering what customers want, what they're demanding, it can be very detrimental to you, and could force them to start looking at alternative methods of trying to get their infrastructure, whether that be cloud or service providers or other aspects. Next slide, please. Okay, another key aspect here that's a big issue for organizations is disaster recovery testing. When we look here, you see that very few are actually doing more than twice a year testing, which is what we would recommend. Only about 39% out of the 204 that we surveyed said they were doing that. To me, that is very scary. Right? In reality, in the age we're in now, there's constant changes to servers, constant changes to drivers and firmware, constant changes to software and applications and all these different things. And when you start thinking and adding up all these different changes, it's really not enough to just do a once-a-year disaster recovery test. So many things could be changing from the last time you do a test until you actually have to do a recovery. Yes, to me, one of the other key things you have to think about in terms of revamping your environment is making sure that the new environment you're going to will allow you to facilitate faster and more frequent disaster recovery tests to make sure that you're not, even if you're using this in insurance, make sure that the insurance actually works. There's no point in doing this if you can't ensure that your applications will come back in a timely manner and that there will be a minimum amount of disruption. Next slide, please. And in the next section here, we're going to be talking about how you're going to be trying to transform your infrastructure with disaster recovery and some of the key things to start looking for. Next slide. No surprise, actually, when we took this survey a year ago, and we're going to be revamping this in the next couple of weeks or so, but when we asked customers about, well, what's your top storage objective from last year? It was improving backup and disaster recovery. While there's a lot of other key things that are important, like reducing cost, additional storage capacity, and improving agility, it is telling that it's still very important to improve backup and disaster recovery. Backup and disaster recovery is not just a chore; it's actually a key requirement, and something that, quite frankly, if you're not doing correctly, that's something that could be very career-threatening if you can't respond and can't react to some of the negative things that may happen from an outage. I think the other key aspect here to think about is, beyond the DR part about this is, if you look at these other capabilities like reducing cost, adding capacity, and the agility, those are really three keystone items that you start thinking about in terms of the cloud and going to cloud-like architectures. So really, my feeling from this slide is, not only do you have to work on your data protection, but you have to start tapping into new technologies such as cloud and intelligent replication and all these other types of optimizations to make sure that you have this improved agility, capacity, and cost to meet your customer expectations. Next slide. And again, I think another key aspect that's really hurting IT staffers today is the expectations in terms of how long it takes to provision storage and serve resources. Right now, it takes way too long to do that, in my opinion. Based on the people that we surveyed in this, for production workloads, about 24% of them were provisioning their workloads, their storage and VMs in a matter of minutes for production, while it was a little bit faster for test dev, where it's probably less critical, about 27%. To me, this is a bit of a gap, though, because if you start looking and trying to compare a traditional environment versus some sort of public environment where it's very easy and very quick, where the expectation is that if I request something, I'll get it in a matter of minutes, that shows that there's a bit of a gap there in terms of what some of these service providers can provide and what we're able to do today with traditional infrastructure. Provisioning, to me, is one of those key areas that you have to fix and you really have to take seriously going forward, because right now the environment's changed. I mean, your customers and your clients, they want to be able to fail quickly. If they're going to fail, they want to fail quickly. If they want to get an insight, they want to get that insight quickly. While it was great to have traditional architecture that's tuned and created exactly to your specifications, at this point, it's more important to be fast for some of these workloads, and unless we can solve that provisioning gap, that's going to be a big issue going forward for traditional infrastructures. Next slide. And so to me, like the answer, to me, or the potential answer to start looking at is start looking how you could start using clouds together with disaster recovery, whether that be a public cloud or a private cloud. To me, this new generation of DR to cloud type capabilities, it's really great because it's emerged as a low-cost alternative to traditional DR. Traditional DR being you have the same exact machine on two different sides. Traditional DR meaning very heavy-handed, very expensive, and very difficult to maintain. To me, this new level of virtualized DR and cloud DR capabilities, that's really transformative. Again, one of the other key aspects here is if you go to a cloud model, whether it be private cloud or public cloud or managed service provider, you're able to start tapping into things like the pay-as-you-go model. So you're not really paying for the resources until you actually do that failover, which is great and very powerful for people that are very cost-conscious about how you're going to do this. Right now, we are only talking about virtualized workloads. I mean, clearly, there's still a lot of physical workloads that are out there, but really, the majority of things are going to be virtualized going forward. That's going to be a lot of bulk set and a lot of things you need to care about. And another point that I'm going to be making multiple times throughout this presentation is, don't think about DR as insurance anymore. Start thinking about it as workload mobility. I think that's really the key aspect in the future of DR, and really the thing that unlocks why this is powerful. In terms of what are your deployment options today, in some cases people are doing a do-it-yourself type thing where they're acquiring the technology, they're acquiring a secondary space and secondary resources to fail over to, and managing the process themselves. Another way that people are doing this is by using disaster recovery as a service providers. In which case a managed service provider is managing the whole thing and providing the white glove service. So you've got somebody to help you out if there is an emergency and maybe you can't get to your data center and you need to do that failover. These are just some of the options that are available today, but I think those are definitely things to consider when you start looking forward. Next slide, please. Last section, I'm going to be going over recommendations. Okay, to me, you really got to care about cost control. We did talk a little bit about public cloud as being that target, but there are definitely things to consider when you think about using some of these services as the target and the cost that can, problems that could arise if you're not doing a good job of managing your resources and turning things off when you don't need it. As you know, if you go to a cloud environment, you're going to be charged on capacity. That's usually on a dollar per gigabyte type basis. While object storage tends to be cheaper, when you start looking at what you really need in terms of potentially using flash-based storage or other more expensive primary storage to handle the application performance requirements of your workloads, those things can be quite expensive over the long haul. So you need to be able to manage that. You need to make sure that you're buying the right resources at the right time and not really wasting money by putting things on flash when you don't need to do it. Another key aspect is with regards to bandwidth. While the ingress fees are usually free, that the bandwidth to pull workloads in, a lot of these providers charge a huge amount of money for egress or moving data from their cloud outbound. So that's definitely something to keep in mind and something that can really spiral out of control if you don't manage that correctly. The other aspect, as I mentioned, was that cost for high performance and application storage. So you got to be careful about that and make sure you're using things in the right way. Next slide. And the other thing that we believe in is, while it's clear that we're moving towards cloud environments, to me, it's not just public cloud into the future. If you look at this chart here, the left-hand side of bars is talking about business apps today. The middle set of bars are for data and analytics, and the right set are for email and collaborative applications today. And what these bars are showing is the progression of where workloads are today and where they're going to be going in the future for data protection. As you'll see here, the big bar in terms of the on-premise bar, which is that bottom blue bar, is going to get smaller for each of these workloads. But as you can see here, what's interesting is that while there may be a misperception that it's all going to public cloud, it really isn't. That orange section represents public cloud, and while it's growing in a sizable amount for all these different workloads over the next 2 years, the key thing to look at is, hey, it's not just going to be that. There's also going to be growth for things like managed service providers and hosted services. There's also going to be growth for third-party co-location facilities. And to me, that signifies that it's not just going to be a public cloud. There's probably going to be private cloud opportunities and managed service provider opportunities. I don't believe everything's going to go one way or another in terms of the extremes. It's probably going to be multiple different types of clouds that you need to tap into. And because of that, that's why when you start looking at your technologies and how you're going to leverage these things, you need to have really strong workload mobility capabilities to tap into all these various clouds. Next slide. And with that, I'm just going to wrap up in terms of what I think in terms of the final recommendations. To me, again, don't look at DR as just insurance. It's got to be about workload mobility. Backup alone is not enough. You need to have high availability to make sure that those workloads are back up and running. It's not enough to just say, I've got a copy of it, we didn't lose data. You have to have that workload availability so people have access to what they need to get. The other aspect is, definitely, it's about failover, not just failover, it's about mobility and tapping into all those various types of clouds. I think the other key thing is, as you start looking at the cloud, there are some key aspects in terms of trying to tap into that pay the elasticity and only using resources when you need to, but you have to be careful about how you use those performance and capacity resources. And you also need to turn the water off when you're not using it. So definitely look at stopping services when you no longer need it. And again, the other key aspect is with cloud, it's really about more of a more distributed environment. And because of that, you have to start thinking about how you could use cloud to extend infrastructure to new geographies or new territories. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jen.
Thanks,
Turn it back
Henry.
over to Brian, actually.
It is going to be Brian.
Yeah. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Brian here from HPE, Cloud System Product Marketing. Oddly enough, we're getting a rare non-cloudy day here in January in Seattle, which is great. Henry did a great job of covering some kind of the theory and the trends of what's going on in the market right now. We know that there is a push to cloud. We know that there is a multi-cloud push. This on-prem thing is still a big part of our world. We're seeing the public expand, and we know that self-service provisioning is extremely important. The ability to actually access these resources by the people that need to use them is a key component here. And we know that all these things need to be highly resilient, highly protected, highly secure, highly available, so that when we move our business critical workloads to these resources, they actually work and they're there when we need them. And if they go down, they come back up very quickly. I'd like to take a second and look at a little more tactically what that actually looks like. What are the type of products that we might put in place? What does the architecture, or really more the marketecture, look like? What might your deployment look like there? And then how is HPE working with Zerto to make sure that we are providing this highly available cloud platform for whatever your workloads might be? So what we're first looking at here is actually a great segue from that last slide that Henry showed. If you'll remember, there's a great distribution of where we think, here at HPE, but also where 451 has discovered that a lot of our constituents and enterprise clients think our workloads are going to live in the future. There's going to be a big component of private cloud. There's going to be a big component of public cloud. There's going to be a lot of virtualization. There's going to be a lot of traditional IT. So that's kind of what we see across the bottom of this diagram. And I'm sure if you guys were all to go look at your own environments now, you'd probably see something pretty similar, right? Maybe you've started an investment in private cloud. You've got a little bit of that running. You probably have a development team somewhere that has somehow gotten a hold of a credit card and is on Azure, is on AWS, and no one's quite sure of what they're doing. And then we certainly got a large amount of legacy workloads, traditional IT, traditional databases that have been used for a number of things. So this bottom layer is really the reality of almost every organization that I speak to. We've got a lot of different resources. And those resources are consumed by what is actually important, our workloads, right? We've got a large number of traditional workloads. We're starting to get some cloud-native workloads on those new cloud platforms. That's really where we make money. That's really where we do business. Everyone's talking about, our traditional IT is highly resilient, or our private clouds, this scale or that scale. You don't make money on having resiliency or scale. You have money on running those workloads and knowing what they're doing, really offering the best possible experience to your end users. That's where your web app lives. That's where you're performing the big data that you're selling to whatever customer you're doing, whatever analytics. So that's what we need to make sure is running at the most optimal and the most highly available level. And across all of that, we need some layer of management for all of this. And this is really what we see is one of the biggest challenges that our clients and the folks that we deal with are facing. Yes, we have Azure. Yes, we have AWS. Yes, we have OpenStack-based private cloud. Yes, we have traditional IT. Each of those are siloed. They have their own tool set. They have their own metrics. I don't have anywhere that I can really go see what is happening across all of these and set any kind of rules, parameters, limitations, operations around, governing restrictions around how those platforms are used. Now, on top of that, there needs to be some layer of services that goes with all of that. The design, the implementation, the optimization, the management of all this is really complex. As you can see just from our simple little architecture diagram here, we've got 10 to 15 different components, and each of those is obviously a highly detailed implementation. So it makes sense to bring in some level of expertise to go with this and help you guys really architect and craft what is this hybrid IT solution going to look like? What is this multi-cloud world that we're looking at? So HPE has what we believe is a solution for this multi-cloud world. If we can go to that next slide, please. We start out by defining some of the capabilities that we need this multi-cloud solution to be capable for. What are the use cases? What problems are we going to solve? So the first thing we need is we need to make sure that it really is truly a solution for hybrid IT. It's inclusive of multi-IaaS environments, again, AWS, Azure, OpenStack, ESX, whatever that is important to you. We want to make sure that we're supporting multiple hypervisors, and we want to put some automation and some orchestration around that. What is the one tool set that we can use to see and govern and monitor and manage across multi-cloud environments? So that's our first requirement. Our next requirement is that we need to remove some of the barriers for the people that are actually going to use these resources, this developer enablement concept. So this is what Henry was talking about when we talk about self-service. We want our private cloud experience to be as close to a public cloud-like experience as possible. Can a developer go in and say, these are the services I need, these are the durations I need them to be, this is even the type of hardware I want it to run on, tell me what that's going to cost my organization, and then provision it for me in minutes. So that's something that we're really, really big on. And can we support the various different work styles, languages, workloads that those developers are going to be interested in? Can we move traditional apps that direction? Can we build cloud native apps? Are there tools included that will help me do that? So that's our second requirement. Third requirement is going to be make implementation of this as simple as possible. Base it on open source technology when you can, put it on industry-leading, highly resilient hardware, and give me some kind of services to help me understand what I need, how to get it, how to use it. So being a unified solution that is a hardware, software, and services solution from one vendor, designed to work together from the ground up, easy to implement in my own data center. Don't make me cobble it together from 4 different vendors and 5 different solutions and all these different kind of things. I want something that's designed to work together. So our solution for that is Helion Cloud System. So we start at the base level at what HPE is probably best known for with our industry-leading infrastructure. So we are actually the industry's largest provider of on-prem private cloud infrastructure, hardware, networking, storage. You guys are probably familiar with the Hyperconverged 380, the world's best serving seller, the DL360. A lot of solutions in there that HPE is known for. On top of that, we want to make sure that we're inclusive and a provider of cloud and other traditional platforms. So within Cloud System, we provide Helion OpenStack, which is our 100% API compliant, very close to trunk, enterprise grade distribution of OpenStack. That's something that you can choose to use in your cloud system deployment or not. We want to make sure that we're also inclusive of things like Azure, AWS, traditional IT. So as we get up into the management layer, we want to make sure that we can self-service and provision and manage and monitor across multiple cloud and traditional platforms. So Helion OpenStack's in the box, and that's an option if you don't want to do that. Bring whatever else you already have in your environment. You probably already have public cloud. You probably already have VMware. Bring that under the management of your cloud system and really kind of unify that environment. Also included with Helion Cloud System is an application platform or a platform as a service. That's Helion Staccato. And then finally, services on top of that. And that can be from HPE, that can be from an HPE partner. I'm not overly concerned about that myself as long as you're getting the help that you need to understand what your options are, what you really need to support the workloads and the growth into the development that you're looking to do, and really manage and monitor that and make it optimal. So starting with our infrastructure, putting Helion OpenStack on that, putting Helion Staccato based on Cloud Foundry on top of that, making sure that you can manage and monitor all of that, and then wrapping it in services for design and implementation and assessment. That's truly what Cloud System is. And we believe that that is a highly resilient, highly effective, very broad use case solution for hybrid cloud. But we also know that the workloads that you guys put on these are hypercritical, and we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that that workload is highly available and supports your business. Next slide. Which brings us to entering into this agreement with Zerto and seeing how Cloud System and Zerto software work together. And I'm not seeing the slide advance. Can we get to the next slide, please?
Yeah,
There we
Brian,
go.
so it can't buy land. Okay, it might just be a little slower getting all the way over to Seattle.
If you guys are seeing it, that's great. I'll do it for my local copy. That may just be me. So we knew that we wanted to minimize revenue and reputation loss due to downtime. No matter how resilient and how well architected your solution, we know that there is some small percentage of downtime that's going to be inherent in anything. No one, absolutely no one is going to claim 100% resiliency and uptime all the time. You hear the term 3 nines, 4 nines, 5 nines. No one's saying 1.0. Or 100.0. So we know that happens, and when we look at some of the numbers, even those 0.0001 downtime gets really, really terrifying. You see something like the financial sector, where they're only experiencing 3.6 hours of downtime per year. That's pretty astronomical when you look at 24 by 365. But each of those hours costs you $10 million. All of a sudden, that 3.6 is pretty significant, and we continue to see those kind of trends. Retail sees about twice the downtime hours. It's lower cost per hour, but it's still kind of scary. So whatever your cloud solution is, we know that we need to do everything we can to minimize that loss, because it's expensive. So the first thing we did was we targeted what is the key use case, or what are our customers using the most on cloud system. What's the most effective thing we could target, and that's ESXi workloads. So what that does is, we'll get into how Zerto works and what it all backs up here in just a second, but any VMware workloads that are provisioned through cloud system are going to be made highly available through Zerto, but it's also the management plane. So those are virtual appliances that are installed on ESXi, and that means that Zerto can fail over, make highly available that management plane for your entire cloud system deployment. So with that one simple use case, we kind of hit the broadest amount of help that our customers need with making sure that their solutions are highly available. But why Zerto? That's a really good question too. And we really looked at Zerto for their reputation, their capabilities, and really the faith that the customers and frankly a lot of our competitors and other organizations out there in the market have placed in Zerto. So if you start to look at disaster recovery as a service providers, 8 out of 14, I don't know the percentage off the top of my hand, but yes, that's more than half, quick math, are relying on Zerto. So we're going to an industry standard, highly successful, well-proven partner to help make sure that those ESXi workloads on cloud system are as available as absolutely possible. So that's a quick overview of what is cloud system, how do we see the world, and how we plan to partner with Zerto to make sure that when you trust cloud system with those critical workloads, that it's always going to be available to you. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Jen, who's going to dive in a little bit more on what that disaster recovery for cloud system with Zerto looks like. What are the specifics on what we can cover, and how is that actually going to operate, and frankly, how quickly can we get those workloads back up and running, because ultimately the workload is what's important. So thank you guys for your time. My email's at the end of this, and I'm happy to answer questions in the chat window or via email. But Jen, tell us more about Zerto on cloud system, please.
So thank you, Brian. I will. And actually, I got a note, and they said it's not you. There's a huge delay on the slide. So I apologize for that. I'm not sure it can be causing the delay. Can you see my slide now?
I can, yeah, and I'll go ahead and still take the blame on the lag, but I think we're up to speed, Jim.
Okay, cool. Okay, so as Brian mentioned, we partnered with HPE to deliver kind of a top-to-bottom infrastructure platform, so you'd always have availability for your data and applications, as well as a really simple, slick solution. So Zerto can do many things. I'm not going to go through every single thing that we have here, but kind of the big things are the fact that you can go on-premise disaster recovery to public cloud. So, we can partner together if you, as Brian showed and Henry both discussed, you are going to start to put things in public cloud. So maybe in your own environment, you want to leverage HPE and then do disaster recovery to another target. It's automated, so automation is really important in today's day and age. You saw the disparity between what end users think they should have for their application downtime versus what IT thinks. And the way to accelerate that is through automation, so making it really easy to just click a couple buttons and ensure a consistent process. It installs in minutes. It's very simple and easy to use. Our customers spend less than an hour a week managing Zerto virtual replication. It's click to test anytime with the ability to get a compliance report. And then the last thing I'll hit on here is the journal. So this is kind of like a TiVo for your environment. So you're able to rewind to any point in time. So it's up to 30 days of historical information, and customers have used this to undo things like cranky patches that just don't seem to be applying correctly, and ransomware is another big one. So how does Zerto work? So this is a simple overview of the architecture. I say simple because here we have 2 sites, and Zerto is able to protect multiple sites. The Zerto Virtual Manager will plug in to vCenter, and then they'll push out the virtual replication appliances on each of the ESXi hosts. So this ensures a scalable solution for the environment. It's continuous block level data replication between sites. So this is what delivers RPOs measured in seconds. It does not use snapshots or any kind of impact in terms of the application. It's a very, very low impact replication mechanism. And it's agnostic, so you can replicate from anything to anything. This becomes very interesting when you're looking to migrate workloads from your older hardware onto your brand new shiny HPE cloud systems. So we can accelerate that so you can realize the value of that high-powered infrastructure faster. The unit of replication within Zerto is a virtual protection group, and this is a group of virtual machines that make up an application. So you might have something like your CRM application, so it has a back-end SQL Oracle database, 4 or 5 application VMs, and maybe a front-end web server. You can protect those consistently with right order fidelity, leveraging the virtual protection group. This also lets you do things like move VMs around, you're able to vMotion, things like that. So it makes it easier to take advantage of the full flexibility of the virtual environment. Within the virtual protection group, you're also going to set things up like boot order. So boot the database server first, wait a couple seconds, then do VMs, and then the web server, and also re-IP. So what do you want the IP addresses to be for a production failover, and what do you want them to be for a test failover? So as I mentioned, the journal, it's up to 30 days of historical checkpoints. So if something happened at noon, you could go to 11:59 in so many seconds and recover the environment prior to that. From the journal, you can recover full sites, applications, specific virtual machines, and then files. So if someone's been working on a file all day, I was actually talking with a customer and said, you know, how often do you get asked to pull a file? And he said, oh, at least 4 times a day, someone will come to me, I deleted something, can you please pull the file back? So being able to pull it from within the last 5 or 10 minutes and preserving all the work that was done versus going to a backup, as you can imagine, makes him very popular with his team. I put this slide in because I do webinars with our customers, and often I get asked, is it really just 3 clicks to fail over? And they'll say, and it got to the point where someone would start saying, this question isn't for the marketing person, this is for the customer, I want to know what it looks like. And he offered to share a screen and show this process, so we just put together an automated slide to show you what recovery looks like. So when you slide the little slider from test to live, you can see everything turns red at the bottom. This is to let you know you are doing an actual failover. This is not a test. So you click the failover button. You can select 1 VPG for all of them to failover. You'll look at the parameters. Is it going to the right place? So it's hard to see because the font is so small. But for example, the 4th column, like from the checkbox, you have your VPGs, the direction, and the peer site. You can see some are going to fail over to AWS, some are going to go to a Hyper-V environment, some are going to go to a VMware environment. Is that what you want? Then you select the point in time for the journal, and then you start failover. So it really is just a few clicks to failover. And then just to kind of wrap up, so we look at delivering resilience for evolving IT. So we want to make sure that there is no lock-in, that you can move between different platforms, between different hypervisors. We want to make sure that you're able to protect your environment. So you can run the non-disruptive recovery reports. You can do non-disruptive testing. You're able to test at any time with Zerto. Replication is still happening, and you are protected, and if in the middle of the test you need to stop and do a real failover, you can. The migrations I mentioned, so it makes it easier to get from your older IT infrastructure onto brand new platforms like your HPE cloud systems, because we know that you make significant investments and you want to realize the benefits of those investments fast. To evolve, so first step to cloud, I think we saw from Henry's discussion, and even Brian touched it as well, there is going to be some movement of workloads to cloud, and we just want to be a partner for that. So HPE and Zerto together want to help you select the right things to do to put into cloud. So do you want to do disaster recovery to a cloud? Do you want to move a workload to the cloud? Do you want to look at other options? So this is a great first step to get into the cloud, because with disaster recovery, you're going to put it through a few more paces. You're going to get more comfortable with the cloud, and then you can see, should I be doing more? And then the last point, this is actually the hardest message I have to communicate, that it is very, very simple to use, because everyone says they're simple. No one tells you how hard they are. And actually, I'm just looking at a question came in. So this is from a gentleman. He said, I can tell you all of these features work. I've used Zerto in migration and in DR. Recovery is very fast. Granular file restore, test DR, VM to Hyper-V, VMware to Hyper-V. So it is a very powerful solution. We'd love to work with you together to see if HPE and Zerto could be a fit for you. And then I think I have one more slide. Of course, I can't find my cursor. There it is. There we go. So I do see a couple more questions, and we'll certainly take those. Maybe those questions will kind of get your juices flowing on additional ones. But if you have any questions for myself, for Henry, or Brian, feel free to email us. Henry and I are both on Twitter as well. So let us know if you have any questions. So here we go. I have a question here. It says, regarding consistency groups, are there any issues with data in flight for recovery? Is the recovery crash consistent or application consistent? This is specifically for databases. So there is the data in flight. So that's where you get the RPO. So we have RPOs measured in seconds. So the data in flight is basically that RPO. Most of our customers with Zerto see a 5 to 15% RPO, and you ask crash consistent, application consistent. So we deliver crash consistency. And it is possible to get to application consistency if that's something you require. If you just want to send me an email, I can send you some additional information which outlines that specific recovery process. So someone's asking, can I buy the product separately? So although Brian and I would love for you to buy Zerto and HPE together, if you're interested in just HPE, certainly you can approach HP for that. And same thing with the Zerto piece. And then let me see. Sorry, the questions are coming in kind of fast and furious, just expanding. So Brian, question for you, and I don't know if this is something that you can answer because I don't know how typical it is, but someone's asking, what's a typical HPE cloud system deployment look like? I assume they mean in terms of the unit that's most popular.
It depends. Yeah, a couple ways to answer this great question. So I'm going to throw out a couple of possible answers, and if nothing hits right, please feel free to email me. We can talk further. But typical HPE deployment, there's kind of 3 scales. So let's start looking there. If you're a medium to large business, or we're looking at doing like a remote branch office kind of thing, deploying that a hyper-converged 380 probably makes the most sense. If we're doing a larger, enterprise scale deployment, doing that on a converged system 700 makes sense. If you are doing a large scale enterprise deployment, but you also want to run traditional applications alongside cloud system on that shared infrastructure, we offer that on Synergy, which is a unique capability. So that's kind of the scale question. More kind of the architecturist question. The typical deployment usually looks like someone, kind of like I alluded to earlier, already has a couple different providers somewhere in their environment. They have VMware, they have public cloud, looking to unify that across the top. They'll usually then do some degree of Helion OpenStack private cloud deployment. Sometimes they have some experience there and are ready to make a big push to the cloud. More often, that's kind of their sandbox or their first testing in that mode 2 kind of world. We move a couple workloads over to that and then grow that as it happens. So first and foremost, it appears to be largely kind of a hybrid IT management type of play, with the private cloud starting small and then growing over time. So hope that's the direction you're looking. If it's not, my email's on the screen. Happy to talk with you further.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brian. And then, Henry, this is more of a comment from me, actually. One thing that I noticed is, although we see increasing requirements for disaster recovery testing, some people are still doing it just once a year or less than that. But I did see that people are testing 2 times or more a year, and I think that's an improvement. Do you think that although people do need to test more, are they testing more than they did before?
I think with the testing, the easier you can make it, the more automation you can provide, the more it's going to happen. I think that we've seen a lot of really good advances from the players, Zerto and others out there, in terms of trying to script things and make things easier to do that testing. And to me, that's really what it's about. If you can make it easy, then people will do it. If we're doing the old traditional testing where everybody loses a weekend and you go to some bunker site to do the failover, well, most people aren't going to want to do that more than once or twice a year. But I think what's powerful about going to this new paradigm for data protection and workload mobility, it realistically becomes something where you can do this really quickly, you can do it without risk, and you can do it so you're not really disrupting things. And to me, that's why the testing aspect is going to get a lot more better, and it has to get better because that's what customers expect. They need these things back up, and if you're not keeping up with the changes, you're just increasing the amount of risk you could take if there's an outage.
Okay, awesome. And we will make that our last question. If you had a question and we didn't get to it, I don't see any others because the couple that came through, we did answer through other things, which is fantastic that you all had similar questions. So it means we're doing pretty well on message. But if you do have any other questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. And Henry and Brian, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.